But God's diet is never sufficient for people with unrestrained appetites. We are longing for something more, something bigger. We become ungrateful for small mercies and we church hop. And when your appetites are unrestrained, you complain rather than celebrate. You compare rather than congratulate. You compromise yourself to get something more. Discontented people we are, living in seasons of discontent because dissatisfied with what God offers. Inadequate, we say. Cannot sustain us, we say. Can God really spread a table in the wilderness? What more do they want? He gives them enough to sustain them, but they are hankering after more. And that is why so many of us end up with seasons of discontent. And people leave the church, can't bother come back no more because nothing not going for me. People say that all the time. Nothing not going for me. And people leave the church and can't bother to come because God not give me no blessing. When if only they would count their blessings and name them one by one, it would surprise us what the Lord has done. We are experiencing seasons of discontent, unrestrained appetites lead to seasons of discontent. The people of Israel, with everything that God had done for them, you read it, delivered them, protected them, guided them, provided for them, and yet, can God really set a table, a feast in the wilderness? Unrestrained appetite. But secondly today, unrealistic expectations lead to disappointment with God. Unrestrained appetites inspire discontent. Now, unrealistic expectations inspire disappointment with God. Can God really spread a table in the wilderness? Think about it. The image of a table spread with all kinds of stuff, meat and drinks and wine and cake, but all around it, a desert place, dry, decaying. What kind of image are we dreaming of when we long for a table spread in the midst of the wilderness? It's magic we are seeking. It's magic. We want God to be a magician. For we must understand that the wilderness is a real place. It is a place of scarcity. It is a place of intimidation. It is a lonely place. It is a desolate place. It is a deadly place. It is wilderness. Wilderness. And Christians live today as if by the turn of a hand of God, your wilderness can become a bountiful place. Christians live today as if God were a magician. It's like a little boy who forget to study for the exam or I gloat him time. And then go pray God for give me a 1 in exam. It's magician God that, man. Some things just are unrealistic, man. You got to put in the work to get the 1. There is no magician. And if you get 1 and you never study or do not work, somebody said something there is not you and is not God. It's a wilderness. And Jesus said, in this world you will have tribulation. In this world you will have trials. For we live in a wilderness. What do we expect to happen in a wilderness except this, that God can sustain us in the wilderness? But we must be careful of what we expect, for God gives us just enough to take us through. The song says, my Lord knows the way through the wilderness, and all I have to do is to follow. Here are the people, we do not like this food. They say, we do not like this food. Later they will say, we do not like this place, for they will long to go back to Egypt. We do not like this place. We do not like this food. And then they will say, we do not like this God, for this God is not providing for us a banqueting hall in the midst of the wilderness. Can God really spread a table in the wilderness? Brothers and sisters, hear this morning. Our God is no magician God. We live in the wilderness. And in the wilderness, God doesn't guarantee anybody wine and drink and ham and bacon. But what God guarantees is that He will give us enough to sustain us and take us through. God's diet for the people was simple: manna and water. But for them, they long for something more spectacular. Like what? Like a banqueting hall in the midst of the wilderness. But it would never happen. For such a table makes us fat and lazy. Such a table makes us slovenly and inflexible. The wilderness is a place of movement and mission and worship. But such a table makes us comfortable, relaxed, and self-confident. Cut your tin and smoke your pipe in the banqueting hall when the wilderness calls for a people on mission and on a journey. Such a table makes us lazy and flat and fat. God's diet is adequate for us. God's diet is available and assured. But because we live with unrealistic expectations of a magician God, we conjure up all kinds of images which will never happen in the wilderness. For in the wilderness, enemies conspire against God's project for the world. In the wilderness, beasts torment and threaten. In the wilderness, people get lost and are abused. In the wilderness, young people lose their way because of sexual perversion. In the wilderness, murder and violence reign and idols are worshipped. It's not a place to kick back around the table and around the splendorous banquet. But in the wilderness, God offers a delightful 5-course meal. A delightful 5-course meal, like what? Number one, adequate provision to last day by day. Give us this day our daily bread. In the wilderness, God gives us adequate provision to last for each day. And the greedy people them catch the manna and began to store it up and to pack it up and to put it away. And they discover that by next morning it's rotten, because God gives us just enough. But we are not contented with just enough. The 5-course meal begins with this assurance: He gives us adequate provision. Secondly, He offers us an assured presence: I will never leave you nor forsake you. Thirdly, He gives us available power to make us resilient to face any difficulty and to come over triumphantly. And fourthly, He gives us the joy of the Lord, which is our strength. And then He gives us a little dessert in the desert. A company of faithful believers in the church to walk along with us. What more do we want? A banqueting table. Yet modern day prophetic pronouncements today are promising people in the name of God jobs and marriage partners and houses and visa and promotion. They're promising all kinds of stuff. They're trying to spread a table in the wilderness. And one of the things you and I must learn today is that the abundance of possessions is never always a sign of God spreading a table. Because if you are dishonest in your business place and you're earning illegally, your table may well spread full, but it's not God spread it. If you're getting the proceeds from lotto and scamming, we live in a wilderness, but your table may well be spread full, but it's not God spread it. And if you hold back your money from the church to pay an additional mortgage for another house, your table spread full, but it's not God spread it. Shall I speak truth today? And if you're basking in the material blessings you have, without any consideration of the sufferings around you in the wilderness, is not God spread it. It's not so God operate. God is not spreading no big banquet when all around there's desolation. And the people of God this morning must learn something that I want to say long time. You see them TV evangelists that you're watching with them big belly and them nice suit and them big house and posh car, and then Jamaican evangelists that follow back at them, imitate them. Caribbean people must have sense this morning and learn something like this. The economies of the countries like that, where they talk about blessing plan, have been built on the backs of enslaved labor. Your grandfather, your granny, gone before. They have exploited the resources of regions like this one that enable them to live on the hog and to talk about blessings. But you and I still live in the wilderness, and we must never follow back at them and follow fashion. For we know that God gives us enough to take care of us. And not everything that glisters is gold. We are often disappointed with God because our expectations are unrealistic. One Pentecostal bishop told me, nonsense that I've never heard such nonsense before. We're talking about Haiti. And we're talking about Christians in Haiti who have to eat mud cake to live. And we're talking about faith in God. And I asked him if he believed that if a Christian in Haiti who living on mud cake pray to God strong for a Mercedes Benz, if God will provide it. Him say yes. For God can do anything. What crap? What kind of God would know that the people can't find bread and water and provide Mercedes Benz? What unrealistic crap. No wonder so many live their lives discontented with God, for there are some things God does not do. Does not do it. Can God really set a table, a banqueting hall for you and for me when there is so much sorrow and trouble all around? What kind of God is that? God unsure. We long for a God unsure. So the television says, come to my church if you want, get your arthritis fixed. Come to my church, we can do it here. One advertiser said, come, I will touch you and make electricity run to your body, I will do it here. And people flock them places for you, well, want a little fire in your guts. And people run there seeking all kinds of something. God unsure is magic. It's magic. When God does a miracle, it is never to be unsure. It is for his purposes to be fulfilled in this world. So if God provides something for you, and you say it's a miracle, and not just you him give it so that you can help somebody else. Shall I speak the truth today? When God performs miracles in our lives, it's not just few one. It's that God wants to use us to be agents and instruments of his glory in the world. And when it is just me one, it's not God spread it. New Testament lesson today. Jesus reminds us that God does take care of us. Are you not worth more than sparrows? Finally today, can God really spread a table in the wilderness? The question arises as a question of doubt, discontent, disappointment. It reflects the question of the evil one in the book of Genesis. Did God really say? Can God really provide? It's a derisive, mocking, demeaning statement. It is not meant for any good. It reflects a season of discontent and a spirit of disappointment. These questions expose surface faith, for they cut at the heart of who God really is. They second-guess God. For the third mark this morning is this. When we pursue self-indulgence, self-absorbed, self-centered faith, it gives rise to unrestrained appetites. It makes us embrace unrealistic expectations. But finally, we become unreliable in our commitment and we live disloyal lives. We become unreliable in our commitment and our lives are marked by disloyalty. Verses 36 and 37, Psalm 78. What a tragedy when the story is told. The psalmist says, but often they would flatter God with their mouths. They would lie to God with their tongues. Their hearts were not loyal to him. They were never faithful to his covenant because all they were about was their belly. And they flattered God in praise and worship. They lied to God with their words of commitment. But in their hearts, they had no real loyalty to God, for they were only seeking to use God for their personal advantage. They flattered God with their mouths. Isaiah the prophet did say, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Where is your heart? Do you trust, truly trust, in a living God who journeys with us through hill and valley? Or are we following only if he satisfies my every longing? Have we become disappointed with God to the extent that we are hanging on? We're not obeying God. We're not loyal to God. We are seeking something from the books. Have we become unconvinced that God's diet is satisfying, is sufficient, can sustain us? Or have we become religious performers in our commitment? Can God rely upon us when things are tough and nothing is happening? Will you be obedient to God when there is no table spread for you in the wilderness, satisfying your every fancy? Where is the holiness in our lives? Is it because we have become contented simply to flatter God than to live faithfully to God? But who dares flatter God? Be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that shall he reap. Our faith in God is often misplaced, often mistaken. Our appetites are often unrestrained. Our expectations are often unrealistic. And because of that, our commitment is unreliable, and disloyalty is the order of the day. God wants to raise up a loyal people. God wants to raise up a committed people who will say, God, whether present or absent, whether I have or I do not have. The Apostle Paul says, I've learned in every situation, whether I have or don't have, to be content, because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Too many are part-time disciples. Too many are parasitic disciples. Too many are play-acting disciples. Too many are clowns playing in a game of magic. Too many have false and fleeting commitment. It is 2020. And somebody says, 2020, when you have 2020 vision, it means that everything is in order. Well, let's put everything in order today. Let's trust this God who provides enough to sustain us in the wilderness place. God's provision is adequate. Let's trust this God who promises that we can expect that he will take care of us on this journey through the wilderness. Let's remain committed to God. Let's not flatter God or tell God lies with our tongue. God asks this of us. Do not worry. What am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? What am I going to wear? That's the stuff of self-absorbed, self-indulgent, self-centered faith. True faith responds to this invitation. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And then what? Guess what? All things will be added to us in God's timing, in God's season, in God's way. For God provides for us delightful companionship on the journey through the wilderness. God provides delightful sustenance on our journey to keep us on the journey. And God will make of our lives in the wilderness a delightful presence which says to the world, listen, I will trust him and obey. For when we walk with the Lord in the light of his word, what a glory he sheds on our way. When we do his good will, he abides with us still and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey. There's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey for his name's sake. Let's bow together. Simply trusting every day, trusting through a stormy way. And even when my faith is small, I'm trusting Jesus. That is all. Trusting as the moments fly, trusting as the days go by, trusting him whatever befalls. Trusting Jesus. That is all. Across this great congregation today, God has spoken to all of us, yea, to preacher and people alike. Across this great congregation, God has spoken, summoning us to live lives satisfied with God, sustained by God, secure in God. For God gives us enough and takes care of us. He calls us to commit ourselves in faith, to walk with him on this pilgrim pathway. And when doubts and fears arise, the people of God answer, we will trust God. As the moments fly, we will trust God. As the days go by, we will trust God. Whatever befalls, we will trust Jesus. That is all. Let's stand together and sing this song. Simply trusting every day. Trusting through a stormy way. Even when my faith is small. Trusting Jesus. That is all.
Simply trusting every day, trusting through a stormy way, even when my faith is small, trusting Jesus, that is all, trusting as the moments fly, trusting as the days go by, trusting Him whatever befall, trusting Jesus, that is all.
At the beginning of a year, I wonder today if God is calling you to renew your confidence in this God, to make a decision to walk with this God, whatever happens this year. I invite you to begin walking out from where you are as an act of commitment this morning, to trust God, that God will sustain, that God will satisfy, that God will secure us, take care of us. We will trust God in the good times, in the bad times. We will believe that God's offering is adequate, available, and assured, and we will walk with God. I invite you to join me at the front as we sing the next few verses. Brightly does His Spirit shine.
Brightly does His Spirit shine into this poor heart of mine. While He leads, I cannot fall. Trusting Jesus, that is all. Trusting as the moments fly. Trusting as the days go by, trusting Him whatever befall, trusting Jesus, that is all. Singing if my way is clear, praying if the path be true, if in danger for Him call, trusting Jesus, that is all.
Oh, I'm trusting,
Trusting as the moments fly,
Lord, I'm trusting.
trusting as the days go by,
Oh, I'm
trusting
trusting
Him
whatever it wants. Trusting Jesus, that
is all.
this God of whom we have spoken today promises that He'll never leave us halfway and run left us. No. He never let us go when the storms of life come upon us. No. And even if sometimes we get hungry and there seems to be nothing around, or we are in danger and we feel exposed, when we trust God, we have this assurance that He's there. For when I need a friend to tell my troubles to, God is there. When I need a friend, when I'm in distress, God is there. For He'll be faithful to the end. On His promise we can depend. When we need a friend, a guide, a companion, a provider, a protector, a deliverer, God is there. Just walk with God and trust your lives to Him today. Would you not come and join us in the front as we sing the last verse? Trusting Him while life shall last. Trusting Him until the whole earth is past. Trusting Jesus, that is all. Would you come as we sing?
Trusting Him while life shall last.
I am trusting
Him till earth be part.
Oh,
Till
the moments fly. Trusting as the moments fly.
Trusting as the days go by. Trusting
Him what
before.
trusting Jesus Christ. I know the Lord will make a way for me someday. I know the Lord will make a way for me if I only do the trust in God and do the right. I know the Lord will make a way for me, for me. I know the Lord will make a way for me, for me. I know the Lord will make a way for me, if I trust in God and do the right. I know the Lord will make a way for me. I'll say yes, Lord, to your way. Oh, I'll say yes, Lord, yes. I will trust you and obey when the Spirit speaks to me. With my whole heart I'll agree, and my answer will be yes, Lord. Lift our hands and sing. I'll say yes. I'll say yes. Yes to your will and to your. Oh, I'll say yes. Yes, Lord. For when your Spirit speaks to me, with my whole heart I'll agree, and my answer will be yes, Lord, yes. God, we do not even try to flatter you, for you are beyond human flattery. We do not come to lie to you with words of commitment, for God can't be fooled up. But we come today truly and sincerely because we want to trust God more. For we're having to admit, God, that sometimes what you offer seems so small. We long for something more. Sometimes what you offer looks so simple. We long for something more spectacular. Sometimes what you offer looks so insignificant. We long for something more substantive. Sometimes what you offer looks so minuscule. We long for something magical. But today we are confident that what God gives to us is enough. What God does through us is enough. How God journeys with us is all right. We trust you. Yeah, God, we will dream big stuff, but we'll be satisfied with whatever you offer. We long for healing for true. But if it doesn't happen, we'll be satisfied that God is still with us. And that God knows the way through the wilderness. We long for progress and promotion in the life, but if it doesn't happen, we know God hasn't abandoned us. No. God is still on the job. We long for all kinds of stuff, God. Sometimes, like the people of old, in doubt and disbelief and derision, we ask, can God really set us feast in the wilderness? When the truth is, we know that we serve a God who knows where we live and how and who we are, and God knows every condition of our life. And God promises that no evil can befall us. For when my enemies came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. And even when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we'll fear no evil. And when the enemies seem to be progressing and eating them big feast, God's prepared a table for me in the presence of my enemies, which satisfies and sustains me and makes me to know that surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And we say in faith today as our faith commitment, and we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We trust you, God. We want to trust you more. We want to learn to sing when we are in danger. We want to learn to pray when the storm clouds arise. We want to learn to hold on to the anchor, for we have an anchor that keeps our souls steadfast and sure. When the billows roll or when the wilderness raises up against us, we have an anchor. Keep us safe, dear Lord. Keep us safe. For God gives us song in the night season and all the day long. Take care of us, God. We love you. We belong to you. We want to serve you more. Take care of us, God. And remind us that in the wilderness it is true that the hotter the battle, the sweeter the victory. Do that for us, God. For Christ's sake we pray. Amen. I'll say yes, the Lord. Service continues with the celebration of the Lord's Supper. Believers from every church, from any place, are invited to join us at the table. And if you're not a believer and you want to stay with us as the service continues. But if you have to leave, receive this blessing today. Let's stand.